Have you ever felt like you must tiptoe through your own home, measuring every word and every sigh, fearing that the smallest misstep might trigger anger, sadness, or silent withdrawal? Have you found yourself carrying the emotional weight of another person, feeling as though it is your responsibility to keep their storms at bay, to calm their wounds before they even surface? Many people live in this state of quiet tension, slowly learning to make themselves smaller, to soften their joy and silence their needs in hopes of avoiding conflict. This is not simply about living with someone difficult. It is a subtle, draining dance that unfolds when we become entangled with what we call a covert narcissist. Unlike the loud, boastful narcissist who demands admiration openly, the covert narcissist hides behind sighs, self-pity, and quiet contempt. They present themselves as overlooked, misunderstood, or uniquely sensitive souls wronged by the world. Their complaints might sound like, "I would have achieved so much if life had been fair," or "people just don't value real talent anymore." Underneath these words is a hidden belief that they are extraordinary, yet perpetually denied the recognition they deserve. Researchers like Elsa Ronningstam, Campbell Miller, and Pincus describe covert narcissism as marked by deep insecurity, hypersensitivity, and an insatiable need for validation. These individuals avoid the spotlight yet still demand silent affirmation. They criticize and judge from the shadows, their entitlement not shouted but implied, whispered through quiet bitterness. If you love or live with a covert narcissist, you may feel torn between wanting to protect them and feeling utterly drained. You might believe that if only you loved them better or explained more gently, they would finally feel secure. But no matter how much reassurance you give, it never seems enough. Gradually, you may stop sharing your joys, withdraw from friends and family, and lose touch with your own needs, disappearing piece by piece. I want to tell you gently, it is not your role to fix someone's wounds, especially when they are used to control or diminish you. Understanding these patterns is not about blame, but about clarity. It is about seeing clearly so you can begin to untangle yourself with compassion and patience. Today, I will not offer quick solutions. True healing emerges from understanding and the courage to face what has been hidden in ourselves and in others. I invite you to join me, not as a passive listener, but as an active witness to your own journey back to yourself. Stay with me until the end. Together, we will explore the signs and subtle mechanisms of covert narcissism and what it means to reclaim your voice, your boundaries, and your sense of self. You are not alone. When we think about covert narcissism, one of the most striking and perhaps most confusing features is their subtle yet deeply ingrained victim narrative. Unlike the classic overt narcissist who proclaims their greatness openly, the covert narcissist weaves a different story, one rooted in quiet grievance and the belief that the world has somehow conspired against them. I often hear these narratives expressed as though they were self-evident truths. I would have achieved so much more if only people had given me a fair chance. Or I'm actually much more talented than they are, but luck has never been on my side. These statements do not sound like grand boasts. Instead, they emerge as sighs, as resigned acknowledgments of an unjust fate. But beneath them lies the same core dynamic, a deep, unyielding conviction in their own exceptionalism and entitlement. This form of self-pity acts as a powerful shield and also as bait. By positioning themselves as the perpetual victim, covert narcissists avoid the responsibility of change while simultaneously drawing others into their emotional orbit. Over time, you may find yourself feeling increasingly responsible for their unhappiness, as though it is your job to fill in the gaps left by their so-called unlucky life. You might hear them lament, "My boss promoted someone less capable because they play politics better than I do," or "I'm too intelligent for these simple-minded colleagues. That's why they can't appreciate me." In these moments, you might feel an almost irresistible pull to reassure them, to convince them of their worth, to offer endless emotional support, as though you can single-handedly heal their disappointment. What often begins as compassion or empathy slowly transforms into a sense of duty. You may start by listening patiently, offering comforting words and trying to highlight their strengths. At first, this may feel good. After all, being needed can offer a deep sense of purpose and connection. It might even feel like you have discovered something precious, that you alone truly see them, that you are the one person who can help them feel valued. In these early stages, it is easy to believe that if you just love them enough, if you show enough understanding, you can finally reach the part of them that longs to feel whole. But as time passes, the weight of this emotional caretaking begins to take its toll. Rather than becoming more secure or more grateful, the covert narcissist often becomes more entrenched in their self-pity and more demanding of your attention. The moments of tenderness and vulnerability that first drew you in become overshadowed by an unending need for reassurance and validation. You might notice that no matter how many kind words you offer, no matter how many times you try to remind them of their talents, they always find a way to discount or dismiss your efforts. "You're just saying that because you feel sorry for me," they might respond, or "You don't really understand how hard it's been for me." This endless cycle of needing and rejecting support can create an exhausting emotional loop. You may find yourself questioning your own reality, wondering if you are truly helping or if you are somehow failing them. The truth is that covert narcissists are not looking to heal. They are looking to maintain their identity as the overlooked genius or the misunderstood soul. Their story of being wronged by the world is not something they want to transcend. It is something they use to anchor their self-image and to keep others invested in their emotional world. One of the more painful aspects of this dynamic is the subtle guilt it engenders. You might begin to feel that your own happiness or success is a betrayal to them. You might hold back sharing good news, or you might downplay your own achievements to avoid triggering their envy or deepening their sense of failure. Over time, this self-censorship can become so automatic that you barely notice you are doing it. Slowly, you shrink yourself, not because they have explicitly demanded it, but because their silent, unspoken disapproval hangs in the air like a heavy fog. The covert narcissist's victimhood often extends into all areas of their life. In their professional life, they might blame a lack of advancement on systemic bias or incompetent supervisors, ignoring any feedback or personal responsibility. In friendships, they may subtly suggest that they are always the ones giving, yet remain unappreciated. In intimate relationships, they position themselves as the perpetual giver or the emotionally wounded partner who can never be fully understood. Each of these narratives serves to reinforce their sense of specialness, that they are fundamentally different, fundamentally more sensitive, and fundamentally more deserving than others. As someone drawn into this orbit, you may start to feel an overwhelming need to prove your loyalty and devotion. Perhaps you think, if I can just be patient enough, if I can just show them enough love, maybe they will finally feel secure. This hope, while deeply human, often keeps you locked in a cycle of overfunctioning and self-abandonment. You sacrifice your own needs, boundaries, and even identity to hold them up. At the same time, there is often a subtle reward for you as well. A sense of being the chosen one who can finally rescue them where others have failed. This dynamic can be intoxicating, creating a bond that feels profound and fated. Yet beneath this bond lies a quiet erosion of your self-worth and autonomy. You might find yourself unable to make decisions without considering their potential reactions, or you might notice a growing distance between you and your own friends, interests, and inner life. This is not about blaming you for being compassionate or for wanting to help. These qualities are beautiful and essential to human connection. Rather, it is about seeing how these very qualities can be manipulated and turned against you in the context of a covert narcissistic relationship. It is about recognizing that their story of victimhood is not an open wound waiting to be healed, but a fortress built to keep others close while maintaining control. By beginning to see this pattern clearly, you start to understand why no amount of reassurance or sacrifice seems to make a difference. You begin to realize that the covert narcissist does not truly want to heal. They want to be seen as the perpetual victim, the tragic figure who is forever misunderstood and mistreated. This realization can be painful, as it may shatter the hope that has kept you engaged for so long. Yet it is also the first step toward reclaiming your own emotional freedom. In this quiet acknowledgement, there is space to breathe again, to remember that you are not responsible for another person's healing or happiness. You can still hold compassion without surrendering your boundaries, without losing yourself in their endless story of suffering. As we continue this exploration, I invite you to hold this awareness gently. Let it sit with you, not as a harsh judgment, but as a compassionate truth that can guide you back to your own center. Stay with me as we move forward. In the next part, we will look deeper into another crucial aspect of covert narcissism, their hidden judgment and subtle hostility, and how these traits further complicate the emotional landscape you find yourself navigating. Another deeply woven thread in the fabric of covert narcissism is their constant judgment and hidden hostility toward others. While it may not always be immediately visible on the surface, over time, this judgment seeps into every interaction, every quiet sigh, every dismissive glance. It is subtle enough that you might not notice it at first. In fact, it might even appear as casual commentary, as though they are simply sharing an opinion or offering constructive feedback. But as you spend more time with them, you begin to sense that their words carry a heavy undercurrent, a steady drip of contempt that gradually erodes your sense of self. A covert narcissist often masks their superiority behind a veil of quiet criticism. In the family context, you might hear them question a relative's parenting style. "I can't believe they let their child behave like that. If they really cared, they'd have more discipline at home." Or they might look at someone's career and murmur, he only got that promotion because he knows how to flatter the boss. Real talent never needs to stoop to such tactics. These comments may sound casual or even insightful at first, but they are carefully crafted to diminish others while affirming their own sense of intellectual or moral superiority. In friendships, they might subtly undermine your excitement about a new project or passion. You share about a creative endeavor you're working on, and instead of encouragement, you receive a deflating shrug. That's nice, but do you really think anyone cares about that sort of thing? Most people don't have the depth to appreciate what you're doing. In workplaces, they might criticize colleagues relentlessly, calling them incompetent or shallow, often behind their backs, while maintaining an outward image of quiet suffering or misunderstood brilliance. She only got ahead because she's willing to play their games. I would never compromise my integrity like that, they might say, as though integrity is their burden to bear alone. These judgments are not offered as a genuine attempt to help or support. They are not invitations to grow or understand more deeply. Rather, they function as a way to maintain a position of perceived superiority, a quiet throne from which they can observe and critique the world. While they appear reserved or modest on the outside, inside they cultivate a deeply rooted belief in their own exceptionalism, a belief that remains unchallenged precisely because it is never declared openly enough to be questioned directly. Over time, the people closest to them start to shrink. You may find yourself second-guessing your joy, doubting your decisions, questioning whether it is safe to share your dreams or achievements. You might catch yourself holding back on sharing good news because you anticipate the thinly veiled disapproval or passive-aggressive remark that will surely follow. The covert narcissist's quiet judgment does not simply stay in words. It shapes the emotional landscape around them. What makes this dynamic especially insidious is that it often feels ambiguous. You might think, maybe they're right. Maybe I am superficial for caring about this project. Maybe my excitement really is childish or naive. The covert narcissist never needs to forbid your enthusiasm outright. Instead, they plant tiny seeds of doubt, allowing you to censor yourself, to chip away at your own confidence bit by bit, until you find yourself living in a smaller, grayer version of your life. Their judgments extend to all areas of life. You might hear them scorn someone else's fashion choices. It must be nice to have no taste and not even know it about someone's social life. They're always out with their shallow friends. I suppose that's what you do when you have nothing meaningful to offer. Or about someone's body. I could never let myself go like that. Some people clearly have no self-respect. These words are meant to signal to you that they stand above untainted by what they see as the mediocrity of the world. This constant critique serves an important purpose for them. By tearing others down, they sustain the narrative that they are uniquely perceptive, uniquely moral, uniquely aware. They believe themselves to be the lone voice of truth in a world of superficiality and ignorance. It is a painful irony that while they so often claim to be misunderstood and mistreated, they are continuously reinforcing a wall that keeps true connection at bay. You may also notice how they dismiss other people's successes. If someone else is promoted, they attribute it to favoritism or manipulation. If someone achieves a personal goal, they call it luck. You might hear, "She only got that because she knew the right people," or anyone could do that if they had as much free time as he does. In these statements, there is no room for admiration or acknowledgement of effort. Instead, every success is minimized, every triumph reinterpreted as trivial or undeserved. The covert narcissist cannot genuinely celebrate another person's joy because doing so would force them to confront their own feelings of inadequacy and envy. Rather than face these feelings honestly, they turn to quiet contempt, using it as a protective shield against the pain of comparison. And for those of us in their orbit, we might absorb this negativity like a slow-acting poison, unsure where the lines between their judgments and our own self-perceptions begin and end. It is essential to understand that these judgments are not spontaneous or harmless opinions. They are carefully wielded tools to maintain emotional control, to keep others small so that the covert narcissist can preserve their fragile sense of superiority. This is not about sharing preferences or exchanging thoughtful critique. It is about establishing a hierarchy in which they remain at the top, even if only in their own mind. Being in the presence of such pervasive judgment can make you feel as though you are living under constant surveillance, always watched, always evaluated. Even when they say nothing, their silences are heavy loaded with unspoken disapproval. Over time, you may start to internalize their voice, hearing it even when they are not around, guiding your choices, curbing your excitement, limiting your self-expression. In this process, the covert narcissist rarely accepts responsibility for the impact of their words and attitudes. If confronted, they might claim you are too sensitive or accuse you of misinterpreting their intentions. I was only trying to help, they might say, or you're imagining things, I didn't mean it that way. In this way, they avoid accountability while maintaining the upper hand, further entrenching your self-doubt and dependence on their approval. This pattern of hidden hostility and constant judgment is not meant to guide you toward growth, but to keep you anchored in a position of self-questioning and subservience. It is a quiet erosion of your spirit, one that happens so gradually that you may not realize how much of yourself you have given up until you look back and see the hollowed spaces where your joy and confidence used to live. Recognizing this dynamic is not easy, especially when your compassion urges you to see the best in others or to excuse their behavior as simply misunderstood pain. Yet seeing it clearly is a necessary step in reclaiming your sense of self. As you become aware, you can begin to hold your own truths with more confidence to protect your inner life from the slow drip of judgment that has kept you small. I invite you to sit with these reflections gently, allowing them to settle rather than rush to conclusions. We are not here to condemn or to label, but to understand the deeper patterns that shape our relationships and our sense of self. In our next exploration, we will look even deeper into another defining feature of covert narcissism, their intense sensitivity to feedback and the hidden rage that can erupt when they feel threatened. Stay with me as this awareness continues to unfold and reveal the quiet ways we lose and might reclaim ourselves. One of the most striking and often most confusing aspects of a covert narcissist is their extraordinary sensitivity to even the mildest forms of feedback. This hypersensitivity does not show up as open curiosity or a willingness to understand themselves more deeply. Instead, it often manifests as sudden and intense anger when their carefully constructed image is challenged. I have seen this happen in many people's lives, and I have heard countless stories in my practice. It might begin with a simple comment, spoken softly and without malice, perhaps something as innocent as "I noticed you seemed upset during dinner last night. Is there something on your mind?" To most people, such a question might invite a gentle conversation or even an opportunity for connection. But to a covert narcissist, this question can feel like a threat, a crack in the carefully maintained facade of victimhood or misunderstood genius. In that moment, you might witness a sudden shift. Their face tightens, the jaw stiffens, the eyes harden into a cold stare. Or they may avert their gaze entirely, as if you have just committed a terrible betrayal. The voice, which might have been soft and melancholy before, becomes sharp, accusing, dripping with contempt or wounded indignation. You might hear them say, "How dare you question me after all I've been through?" Or, "You just don't understand what it's like to be me." In that instant, you might feel as though you've been transported into a storm you never meant to enter. You may feel a sharp pang of guilt, a desire to retreat, or a sudden need to soothe and apologize, even when you know you did nothing wrong. This is what I call being drawn into the spiral of emotional caretaking. You are no longer discussing the original topic. Instead, you find yourself tending to their pain, calming their rage, reassuring them of your loyalty and love. This reaction is what we refer to as narcissistic rage. While it can be explosive and loud in some overt narcissists and covert narcissists, it often carries a quieter, icy intensity. It might not always look like yelling or physical aggression. Sometimes it manifests as prolonged silence, passive-aggressive remarks, or sudden emotional withdrawal. You feel it as a chilling absence, a cold void that demands you move toward them, make amends, and restore their sense of specialness. The core of this rage is not true strength, but deep fragility. The covert narcissist's identity is built on a foundation of unacknowledged wounds and a carefully maintained narrative of being wronged or overlooked. When someone challenges this story even gently, it threatens to expose the vulnerability beneath. Instead of facing this vulnerability, they lash out to restore their sense of control. The anger is less about you and more about defending their inner world from collapse. For those who live close to a covert narcissist, the consequences of this pattern are profound and lasting. You might find yourself constantly second-guessing your words, rehearsing conversations in your mind before they happen, choosing silence over honesty to avoid triggering their displeasure. Over time, your own boundaries begin to erode. You become more focused on keeping the peace than on expressing your truth. Your desires, needs, and even your small joys start to feel dangerous because they could invite criticism or withdrawal. You might notice that you begin to tiptoe emotionally, learning to read the subtle shifts in their mood before they even speak. You become hyper-attuned to the smallest signs, a raised eyebrow, a sudden sigh, a brief glance that feels dismissive. In this constant vigilance, you lose contact with your own inner voice. You might even start to believe that you are indeed too harsh, too demanding, too insensitive, absorbing their accusations as truths. This slow internalization of blame is one of the most painful aspects of being entangled with a covert narcissist. You may find yourself apologizing for things you did not do or feeling guilt for, simply existing as you are. This emotional pattern teaches you that love means walking on eggshells, that connection requires constant self-erasure. And the more you shrink yourself, the more control the covert narcissist gains, silently confirming their sense of importance and reinforcing their role as the perpetual victim or misunderstood soul. The covert narcissist's use of rage is not merely an uncontrolled emotional outburst. It is a strategic tool to regain dominance and reaffirm their special status. By reacting with exaggerated hurt or cold fury, they force you to step into the role of caretaker, to reassure them, to prove your loyalty once again. In this reversal, they move from feeling threatened to being the aggrieved party who deserves compassion and submission. This dynamic can feel deeply unfair and disorienting. You might find yourself longing for moments of calm for days when you can simply be without the looming threat of emotional explosions. Yet these moments of peace are often fleeting and conditional, dependent on your willingness to suppress your own needs and perspectives. Seeing this pattern clearly can be painful, as it may bring into focus how much of your life has been shaped by trying to avoid their rage. You might recognize the countless times you chose silence, the dreams you set aside, the friendships you let fade, all in the hope of keeping the emotional landscape calm. It is important to understand that these adaptations were not failures, but survival strategies. They were the best ways you knew at the time to preserve some semblance of connection and safety. As you begin to name this dynamic, you reclaim pieces of yourself that have been hidden or silenced. You can start to explore what it might feel like to speak your truth, to hold your ground, to stay present with your own discomfort rather than being swept up in the covert narcissist's emotional whirlpool. This is not a quick or easy process. It requires patience, compassion for yourself, and an openness to rediscover the parts of you that learned to hide long ago. In this journey, the invitation is not to fight or to fix, but to understand and to see with clear eyes, to recognize that their rage is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of their deep-seated fear of exposure and vulnerability. When you can hold this awareness, you begin to step out of the cycle, even if only in small moments at first. I invite you to continue with me as we move forward into the next part of our exploration. Together, we will look at the far-reaching impact of these patterns on families' intimate relationships and professional environments. We will see how this hidden dynamic ripples outward, shaping not only individual lives, but entire systems of connection. Stay with me as we continue to uncover these subtle and powerful truths. When we look beyond the intimate exchanges with a covert narcissist, we begin to see the wide and often heartbreaking impact their patterns have on the larger web of relationships and environments around them. It is not only the immediate partner or closest friend who feels the effects. This dynamic ripples outward, touching children, extended family, and even professional communities. Let us begin with children. Growing up with a covert, narcissistic parent can be deeply confusing and quietly wounding. Children in this environment often learn to hide their successes, to dim their light, so as not to provoke jealousy or contempt. They might sense that their accomplishments are not celebrated with genuine joy, but instead met with subtle criticism or backhanded compliments. Must be nice to have all that time to focus on your little hobbies, a parent might say when a child shares a creative achievement. Over time, these children may learn that standing out is dangerous, that being seen evokes tension rather than warmth. This shapes a fragile relationship with self-worth, leading them to fear success or shrink away from opportunities to grow. They carry forward a sense of guilt for simply existing as themselves, feeling responsible for maintaining the parent's emotional equilibrium at the cost of their own authenticity. In romantic relationships, a covert narcissist's need for exclusive emotional control often results in isolation. You might hear them say, "I only need you. You shouldn't waste time with those people who don't really understand you." What at first sounds like intimacy or devotion slowly becomes a cage. Partners begin to withdraw from their support networks, friends who once offered laughter and warmth, family who once provided grounding and perspective. One by one, these connections fall away until the partner is left with only the narcissist's world, a world shaped by endless emotional caretaking and subtle control. In the workplace, the covert narcissist often fosters small alliances based on shared grievances. They might present themselves as the lone voice of integrity, quietly recruiting sympathetic colleagues into their narrative of being mistreated or overlooked. No one here appreciates real talent, they might say, in hushed tones, inviting others to join them in a collective identity of victimhood. This creates fractures within teams, erodes trust, and diminishes collective morale. The energy that could have gone into creativity and cooperation is redirected toward managing invisible tensions and silent resentments. The long-term consequences of these dynamics can be deeply damaging. Individuals who orbit around a covert narcissist may lose their sense of direction and identity. The gradual isolation erodes the supportive networks that anchor us to reality and nurture our emotional resilience. In professional settings, productivity and well-being decline, replaced by subtle hostilities and unspoken fears. In families, the atmosphere becomes heavy with caution and unexpressed grief as each member learns to protect themselves by staying small and unseen. It is important to recognize that the covert narcissist does not only harm individuals, but can distort entire environments. The wounds they create echo in the hearts of those they touch, shaping lives long after the immediate connection has ended. Understanding this helps us see the far-reaching nature of their influence and invites us to move beyond individual healing toward collective awareness and compassion. As we begin to integrate all that we have explored so far, I invite you to hold space for both the pain of this realization and the quiet possibility of transformation. As we arrive at the close of this reflection together, I invite you to take a slow, steady breath with me. We have gently explored the three key patterns of covert narcissism: the subtle self-victimization that draws you into endless emotional caretaking, the quiet stream of judgment that chips away at your confidence and joy, and the intense, hidden rage that silences your voice and binds you in guilt and self-doubt. These patterns shape not only private interactions, but entire networks of relationships and environments, leaving behind confusion, loneliness, and deep wounds. Yet by recognizing these dynamics with honesty and compassion, you have already begun the first steps toward reclaiming your own inner freedom and healing. I want to thank you sincerely for your presence and your courage today. To sit with these truths is not easy. It requires openness and a willingness to look beneath the surface, even when it feels uncomfortable. By choosing to listen, you have given yourself the gift of greater awareness. And with that awareness comes the quiet power to begin change from within. If you feel ready, I invite you to share your reflections or questions in the comments. When we share, we create connection and remind each other that none of us are truly alone. If this video resonates with you, or you believe it might help someone you care about, please consider sharing it. You never know when a moment of understanding can become a turning point for someone else. And if you would like to continue exploring these themes together, I warmly invite you to subscribe and join this growing community of gentle, honest inquiry. As you move forward, I leave you with this question. Are you ready to step into a more authentic relationship with yourself and reclaim the space that has always been yours? Thank you for being here. Take good care.